Right now, your mind is somewhere else. You're reading these words. But a part of you is thinking about lunch. Or that conversation from yesterday. Or the thing you need to do tomorrow. That drifting feeling is familiar. You've felt it thousands of times before. But what if that wandering mind is not a weakness? What if it is the oldest habit you own? Today, you will spend nearly half your waking hours not paying attention to what you're doing. 47% of the time, on average, your brain is off task. That number comes from a landmark study by psychologists Matthew Killingsworth and Daniel Gilbert at Harvard. They tracked thousands of people in real time using an iPhone app that asked, "What are you doing right now, and are you thinking about something else?" The answer, almost half the time, was yes. But here is the strange part. That statistic is not a modern affliction. It is not a symptom of attention deficit culture or smartphone addiction. That wandering mind is a 300,000-year-old inheritance. Your Homo sapiens ancestors did the exact same thing. They sat by the fire, their hands occupied, their eyes fixed on the flames, and their thoughts sailed elsewhere. So what were they thinking about? Not nothing. They were planning, they were rehearsing, they were simulating futures that had not yet happened. And that ability to project yourself forward in time may be the single most important cognitive tool your species ever developed. But how do we actually know this? We cannot put a fossilized brain in a scanner. But we can study the default mode network, a set of brain regions that becomes highly active when you are not focused on an external task. Neuroscientist Marcus Raichle discovered this network in the early 2000s. He found that your brain consumes almost as much energy during restful mind wandering as it does during intense concentration. That is a clue. Evolution does not waste energy. If your brain is burning calories while you stare at a wall, it is doing something useful. That something is mental time travel. Your ancestors who could imagine tomorrow's hunt, or next season's drought, or the best route to a water source, had a survival advantage. They outlived the ones who only reacted to the present moment. Mind wandering is not distraction. It is anticipation. But surely this was just a side effect of having a large brain. You might be thinking that daydreaming is simply the cost of intelligence, not a feature in itself. That is a reasonable objection. But Jonathan Smallwood, a leading researcher on mind wandering, has shown that the content of these drifting thoughts is overwhelmingly future-focused. In his studies, people spontaneously think about upcoming events more than past ones. And the further ahead they plan, the more likely they are to achieve their goals. This is not noise. This is rehearsal. Think about what your ancestors did with all those hours. They did not have books, they did not have screens, they had fire, and they had each other, and they had vast stretches of idle time. During that time, their brains were not idle, they were running simulations, they were solving problems that had not yet occurred, they were imagining conversations, they were practicing social bonds. Let that land for a moment. 17 hours a week. That is the average amount of time humans spend in spontaneous mind wandering. According to aggregated studies, 17 hours of mental rehearsal every single week. Over a lifetime, that adds up to roughly 30,000 hours of unguided, internal planning. 30,000 hours of imagined futures. That is more than the total hours spent in formal education for most people. So what changed? If mind wandering is so ancient and so useful, why does it feel like a problem today? Because the modern world has filled every silence. Your phone buzzes, your notifications pile up, your stream of content never ends. And in that constant external stimulation, the internal simulation gets crowded out. You are losing the habit your species perfected over 300 millennia. Here is the twist that might surprise you. When researchers gave people a choice between sitting quietly with their own thoughts and administering mild electric shocks to themselves, a shocking number chose the shocks. In a study by Timothy Wilson at the University of Virginia, participants preferred physical discomfort over 6 minutes of uninterrupted thinking. 6 minutes. Your ancestors sat with their thoughts for hours. Now you cannot manage 6 minutes without reaching for a screen. But the cost is real. Creativity collapses without mind wandering. Problem-solving suffers. Emotional regulation weakens. You cannot process your own life if you never let your brain drift through it. That quiet simulation is how you make sense of your past and prepare for your future. It is how you build a coherent story of who you are. You might be thinking this sounds too good to be true. If mind wandering is so powerful, why does it feel so unproductive? Why does it feel like procrastination? Because your modern framework measures productivity in visible outputs. If you are not typing or talking or building, you appear to be doing nothing. But evolution measures survival. And survival depends on being ready for what comes next. The hunter who mentally maps the terrain before dawn is more successful than the one who only reacts. The mother who imagines her child's future dangers is more protective. The leader who rehearses the conflict before it begins is more strategic. So the next time you catch yourself staring out the window, do not pull yourself back. Do not scold yourself for wasting time. You are doing exactly what your ancestors did. You are rehearsing. You are anticipating. You are time traveling. And here is the final mirror. Right now, you are doing it again. You are reading this, but your mind has already left. It is thinking about how to apply this. It is thinking about that moment earlier today when you zoned out. It is wondering what you will do tomorrow. That is not a failure of attention. That is the oldest habit in your species. 300,000 years of drifting. 300,000 years of imagining. 300,000 years of becoming human. So tonight, when your mind wanders, let it roam. Let it rehearse. Let it prepare. Because that wandering is not empty. It is full of every tomorrow you have ever imagined.